Welcome back to Diary of a Speed Reader. Today's book is Mindfulness for Beginners, and I'm giving it 4 stars. Now, mindfulness may seem very new age, but in many ways, it's at the core of philosophy, psychology, and then you blend in meditation, and it can become extremely powerful. Jon Kabat-Zinn is one of the foremost writers in this field, and in that regard, though this is a book for beginners, there is a lot to take away. I'm going to break it down into 3 things. But before we do that, I just wanted to remind you, Diary of a Speed Reader is going to end at 100 episodes on Instagram, and then I'm going to move completely to YouTube. If you like what you've been seeing or would like to just support me, please go to YouTube, Diary of a Speed Reader, and subscribe to that station. Now, let's get on to the 3 takeaways that I have from this book. First is the idea that we're not ever really taught awareness, which he defines as having kind of this dualistic component of thinking and feeling. And you think about how profound that is. If we're going to be talking about critical thinking, subjective thinking, being subjective, but we're never really counseled on as children or even as adults to separate the part that actually is emotion. Even though we know that emotion is at all times coloring judgment, then there is such an inability and a constraint on what we can possibly know and how we can know it. It's very profound and deep, and the way that he describes it is so eloquent that it makes it a little bit easier to digest that as a soundbite. The second thing has to do with this concept of narrative focus versus experiential focus. And the first has to do with our ability to storytell, our need to storytell even, and that it colors the reality of the situation we're in versus experiential focus, which is just living in the moment. Now, the default mode is really narrative focus. And it's interesting because so often people say, well, you just have to change your own story or write your own story. His point is that step 1, you actually have to understand what that means in the first place. And I find that really brilliant. Now, the last thing has to do with his unique idea of what acceptance is. And so often we think about acceptance as something we're receiving. But in fact, this definition is more like letting go. He says that acceptance is the ability to not need things to be a particular way in order for you to be happy. And he means that in the extreme. A lot of people are dealing with some very sensitive things, some really traumatic things, and letting go of that, accepting that is hard. He talks about 3 mental states that make it even harder. Greed, which is the need to want things to be a particular way. Avarice, which is these negative reactions to it, releasing that. And the third really has to do with delusion, which is our view of something which can be colored by our emotional response to it. And it may be true, it may not be true, but the fact is there really isn't any truth. Now, the author is going to do a better job than I do at describing all 3 of these things. And wrapped around it is the idea of meditation, the idea of becoming more aware of the existing moment so that you can separate the feelings of the moment and the actuality of it, the ability to become comfortable with experiential focus in the present, in the here and now, so that you can decide how you want to use narrative focus. It's meditation for the act of letting go, of being comfortable with the way things are right this minute. Very fascinating, and gives me a different perspective on meditation for sure. Speed reading stats, this book was 170 pages. It took me 19 minutes to read. If you want to learn more about speed reading, feel free to comment below. Thank you for liking, sharing, commenting, or otherwise supporting Diary of a Speed Reader, and I will see you tomorrow.